Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SharePoint TV show, in which we're going to talk about Microsoft Teams. For those of you that it's the first time joining us on SharePoint TV, and know that this is a really casual show, and the goal is to get all of your questions answered. So if you have any questions about Teams, please do not hesitate to ask them in the chat, and our two awesome experts today are going to answer them. Before we get started and we get our experts here live, let's go to a quick promo from our sponsor, Valo Intranet. Okay, welcome back. And let me start by introducing our two experts. First of all, I have with me the arce Hess, and we also have Gokan Ozcifci. I know that the show today is the three easiest to pronounce names in the SharePoint community. So I'm sorry in advance to both of you. But how are you doing, the arce?
I'm doing really well. It's great to be here.
Awesome. If I understood correctly, you're actually in Europe right now, in Ireland, right?
I am. I am in Dublin this week, doing some work and some training for a client on SharePoint and Teams, funny enough. So it's a wonderful evening out here.
That's awesome. Did you get a chance to go to the famous temple bar yet?
No, I think I'm going to have that planned for later this week.
For later, okay. I mean, we're only Wednesday, so you still got time. How about you, Gokan? How are you doing?
Well, thank you. I'm doing very well, but I'm super glad to be here at SharePoint TV.
Awesome. I think we finally found a week where you're not traveling as well, and that was pretty tough to do.
It really was. I'm also glad to be home one week because the child, after all this traveling, couldn't remember who the dad was. So it's always good to be home and to say like, hey, I'm still the dad. I'm still your dad. So good to be here as well.
Well, I mean, looking at the picture behind you with that drawing of you, I can understand why they're a bit mixed because that picture looks way better than you in real life. So
I love you. I love you too, Vlad.
So let's get to the subject today, which is Microsoft Teams. And I think in the past 2 years, really, Teams has taken the Microsoft world by storm. It's like crazy popular. Everybody wants to use Microsoft Teams, and users love it. Uh, Last year at Ignite, Microsoft did quite a few announcements, and I think we're starting to actually see some of them actually ship. So, kind of, what are you guys excited about this year so far, and what features you've seen? And I'll start with you, DRC.
I'm really excited about some of the capabilities for accessibility that have come out. The ability for the screen readers to be able to access everything, for messages to be read aloud, is something that I think has been missing from previous versions of different Microsoft products. So I think it really opens up a whole new avenue to a broader audience and being able to be a lot more inclusive in the community.
That's awesome. How about you, Gokan? And by the way, I see in the chat that it's pronounced Yoken.
No, it's really Gokan. Well, I have like 3 pronunciations, one in French, one in Turkish, and one in Dutch, but it's definitely not Yoken. It's Gokan.
I tried.
I think his name is Yammer.
Yeah. You're right.
Oh
For those of you who didn't know, Gokan is Yammer MVP. So even if we're talking about Teams today, he's a huge Yammer guy.
You child.
DRC made me do it. I'm just saying. But yeah, what Teams features are you most excited about? And I think you even had a presentation to share after this.
Yes, I can share it directly, so I can even talk while sharing.
So maybe, Lyman, can we get that screen share up?
There we go.
Yes, we see it now, at least on our chat. Let's give it a few seconds. There we go. We can see it live.
A few exciting announcements done at Ignite 2019, which I'm really excited about, and I think everybody who is using Microsoft Teams in the organization, which will actually love and embrace those new features, because we today now are really and clearly talking about collaboration, because the artifacts in Office 365, the gaps are getting closer and closer, and Microsoft is doing a tremendous job with Microsoft Teams and bringing all of those new experiences in Microsoft Teams. One of them is the private channels. This one is, if I'm not wrong, correct me, Vlad, but this was like the most demanded feature for Microsoft Teams, having a private space.
It was the top one on user voice.
Yeah, so having a private space for members of a specific team, being able to collaborate on files, having private chats, having some personal connectors and getting information even outside of the Microsoft ecosystem, that's something that really amazes me. And I don't know if you remember when we had a talk about the architecture in the backend that I was not really in love how they did it, but at the end, you just understand why they did have like a site collection per private channel. You just love how they did it and how you can use it. So this is something I think which will change the way of collaboration in Microsoft Teams, having private channels.
I think I agree with you there. It's definitely going to change the way that the whole governance plan around Teams is made. Like, when do you create a new team versus where do you create a new private channel? Something that personally, and I mean, you guys are the experts here, but something that has been really tough for me to explain, especially as I do a lot of training to people that aren't necessarily like us three. We do this every day, right? So we know our things. but kind of explaining it to people like, yeah, if you create a private channel, the team owner cannot actually edit the private channel or join the private channel. If you delete the standard channel, the files in SharePoint are not deleted. But if you delete a private channel, the files in SharePoint are deleted. So kind of it comes so many different use cases that it can be tough for I don't want to call it a normal admin, but a non-consultant, somebody that just is responsible at a company that doesn't see 800 different scenarios a month to actually catch up. So have you guys seen any IT resistance from private channels?
I've seen that. Well, Tracy, just go. Yeah.
Yeah, on my side, I mean, it's a really dangerous feature because now admins are worried about having to manage the content that's living in two different places regarding one potential topic or one potential team. From what I've seen, like everyone asked for private channels, but then once the way they were implemented, I've seen more admins move towards private teams versus using the private channels instead.
And
I actually have, I think, okay, no,
and
never mind.
We have also a question, I think, about what from Lady Light, which asked about the management of private channels. That's also a big issue that I've seen at my customers today, because, well, we know you get a separate SharePoint site for your private channel, but the thing is, none of those standard artifacts that we know, such as document features, they are not supported in there. So you may even, if you change the security aspects of that team, they will be erased by Microsoft Teams after 4 hours, and it will just check the security and say like, oh, somebody did a change on the SharePoint site. I will just erase every modification done on the security aspect. You cannot enable any of those other features because they are not supported. So from a management perspective, it's definitely different than managing an Office 365 connected team site or a standard SharePoint team site. It's quite difficult to understand. Like even experts have today some difficulties to understand and bring a clear governance on that. I can't imagine how difficult it should be for an end user to get how it works in the backend.
And I think one of the challenges is also that private channel site collections are not even shown in the SharePoint Online Admin Center.
Yeah. So only by PowerShell, right?
Only by PowerShell. And that's something that I've kind of been telling people for admins forever is that you need to learn PowerShell. Even if you're not in the cloud anymore, even if you're not on-prem anymore where you manage servers and things like that, you're now in the cloud, everything is managed for you, you still got to learn PowerShell because so many things there are PowerShell only.
Absolutely.
But so, any best practices to share with people, kind of when to create a team, when to create a private channel? Should people block even? Because by default, I think Teams permission, by default, any member in the team can create private channels. Do you guys see customers blocking it to only where team owners can create private channels?
I think it's still too new of a feature for me to be able to have any of my clients really commenting one way or another on it. I know that they're trying to figure out all the information, ins and outs of it first before they decide whether it's the right solution for them. So I think it's still maybe, the judgment's out still.
Okay.
So what I do typically say to my customers is always start with the chat. Always have a chat with a bunch of people, try to collaborate on that chat, have a good chat. And if you have to take a decision, then go for a team. If you have to take a decision, bring some other more people, have to collaborate on multiple documents, then go for a team. And a private channel is definitely only for specific purposes. And I do encourage people using private private channels, but it's not always easy to convince any management or organization unit to go all in, especially with the cloud era. They really love to go on a phased approach and release feature by feature into those into teams actually.
And I got a quick question from the chat, and I actually just went and Googled, but I think it's really good to have it for the recording after that. Do retention policies apply to private channels?
That's a good question, actually. Didn't check there full.
I got the answer. I Googled.
Okay.
Like, you know, half of our job as IT pros is Googling things around, let's be honest. But the kind of the private channels, and the RC did a very good point, they're pretty new. And as much as us, let's say MVPs, we like to get our hands on new tech, we like to play around with it, do a bunch of tests, it will still take a long time until best practices are actually done and we actually get the experience from real enterprises that implemented it. And not all features are there yet that actually block some big enterprises to actually adapt it. And the question actually brings a good example that retention for private channel messages is not there yet. You can retain the files because those are in SharePoint, but not the messages yet. So that might actually block some people from some companies from adapting it. Just a quick follow-up question, or Gokan, do you want to take the next one? I know you're monitoring the chat as well.
Yeah, so the next one is like, can't we invite people who are not part of the team? That's actually a correct statement. You can't invite people who are not member of the team to your private channel. They have to be part of your team before inviting them into the private channel. That's actually how they design it. So I hope that will answer to the question, Mausla-Sliminski.
Do you guys think that it's a need to have kind of, like, you know how in SharePoint we can kind of add people to only a folder inside of the site and not give them access to the rest of the site? Do you think it will become a need? I haven't seen it on user voice yet, to actually get people to only channel-only members, if I may.
I think it's a really dangerous concept to kind of play with. I could see people, asking for it because, they're used to having that. But when they start looking at the permissions management around that, like, it's going to become, pretty difficult to manage really quickly depending on the size of the organization. So I think we've learned our lessons through, some of those folders and document libraries with SharePoint, that I hope that we could come up with a potentially better option for Teams by the time that point comes around.
And definitely today, and maybe there is not the need, but Kaizala will be integrated into Microsoft Teams. So I think the use case of inviting others which are not part of a team into a private channel can be resolved with Kaizala, because Kaizala, is like the WhatsApp of Microsoft, which can actually bring other people into a specific chat. And I think Kaizala can resolve that kind of use cases. It's maybe too early, but I think personally that Kaizala can help therefore.
Gokan, are you worried about I'll call it functionality fatigue with Teams? Sometimes it feels like SharePoint 2007, where it's like Teams can and do everything. And do you feel like we're ever moving too fast, kind of down that hole? Just curious.
I had the same feeling like we are moving too fast, like a few years ago. But when you see how today they build the features with the user voice integration, like they check on user voice, which is the most voted feature, most demanded feature, they bring those capabilities into Teams. The only thing I was scared is like you have like multiple teams building Microsoft Teams, like the SharePoint team is building the files experience into Teams. You have the Skype team building the communication aspect, Exchange team, etc., building all of those Exchange capabilities into Teams. But when you see that Jeff Teeper has also taken Microsoft Teams under the umbrella with SharePoint and OneDrive and Office, I'm pretty sure that in the coming months, years, we will have a perfectly aligned tool which will embrace the SharePoint experience, OneDrive, Office, and Teams all together. That was a big miss today, like Teams being managed by multiple divisions. It's going to be like now Jeff leading all of those aspects. I'm pretty sure we will go very fast, but with the essential features that we need.
Awesome, but that's a great question, Darcy, and something that I think some customers are also a bit worried about. Are we making the same mistakes, but is the Teams marketing too much, where we push everybody to Teams without looking at anything? Teams can do everything. It's the Swiss Army knife.
Yeah. Well, please. It's not only. Don't get me wrong, Vlad, but it's not only Teams. But if you look like SharePoint, if we look like how many innovations they had into SharePoint, if we look how many new features they have in OneDrive, if you look like in Office, how they move so fast, I think it's now in the DNA of Microsoft moving fast. It's not like the old era of on-premises where we had to wait 3 years to get new features. Today, you can have a bunch of new features released just one day after what they have announced. So for me, it's a cultural change in every organization, and it's something that we will learn to fail fast and learn fast. And I know, and I'm from Belgium, from the Benelux region, where we have a lot of banks, and they are all struggling to go to the cloud. But we will all learn to fail fast and learn fast, because that's how Microsoft works today. Not only from Teams, but from every single, like even Azure. I'm not an Azure specialist and an expert, but I can definitely see how much new, exciting stuff they bring in Azure every single day. Well, it's becoming really hard to follow up, and every organization and every company will learn to embrace all of those new features. It's going to be hard, really hard, but they will have to if they follow the Microsoft culture.
Awesome. Thank you, Gokan. And let's do 2 more great questions from the chat and then move up to the next slide, because I'm tired of this GIF that keeps on playing around on the screen. Okay, so first of all, question. Have you heard of any news on the ability to move a channel to a different team?
No, unfortunately, there's no public news on that at the moment. It's one of the most highly requested things on User Voice, being able to reassociate channels to other teams and vice versa. And yeah, unfortunately, it's not something that's there yet for us to be able to talk about. So hopefully, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Okay, so Gokan, same thing?
Yeah, same thing.
Okay, now the next one, which will bring a good discussion point, even if, unfortunately, I don't think we can give the full explanation, but can you explain why channels are folders in one document library instead of separate document libraries? I'm often confronted with someone wanting to apply unique metadata columns for the files shown in each of their channel. And I think this is a very valid question.
It is. It really is. But if we respond to that question, then we are actually underlying the architecture of how Microsoft is building Teams. So I don't know. Like, I would love to answer and say, like, this is the major reason why. But then I'm not from Microsoft, so I can only say what I heard. But that's not going to be a valid answer, unfortunately.
Okay, Darcy, do you want to?
I'm the same way. Like, it's definitely something that, has been top of mind and probably driving a few of us a little bonkers. But it's nothing that unfortunately I think anyone in the community is going to be able to answer to. It's going to be one of those things that Microsoft has been made very well aware of the feedback regarding these potential features and some of the areas where there's room for improvement. And we're hoping to be able to see some movement in these areas from Microsoft in the upcoming months, hopefully.
Awesome. Thank you very much, both of you. And yeah, I hope this answers the questions in the chat. Now let's actually move to the next thing Gokan is excited about. And I'll let you talk about it, Gokan.
it's a multi-window capability in Microsoft Teams. So one of the biggest drawbacks we had today with Microsoft Teams is that you are actually forced to use one screen. Like you couldn't actually move and have multiple or parallel works at the same time. You were blocked to use in one screen. But Microsoft announced of having multi-window capability for users that will pop out for chats, meetings, calls, and documents. So that's actually something like Skype-ish, where you could have multiple windows going on Teams. And I think this will also break a lot of barriers into Microsoft Teams. If you can have multiple pop-ups of your work in Teams from chat, meetings, calls, documents, well, then you're not blocked on being forced using one screen. You will be able to have multiple screens. And that's something I'm really, really, really looking forward to Microsoft Teams.
Awesome. Do you see? And I mean, I kind of feel it a lot as well, especially when I'm on a call. But you're in a meeting, but you need to go find information somewhere else, get back to the meeting fast, and not lose what's actually shared. So that's something that will be pretty cool once it comes live.
Definitely, I definitely agree. The only thing I don't agree is like finding information in Teams. It's quite difficult, but with all the rest, I do agree.
Yep. Okay, let's go over to the next one. Arce, do you want to talk a bit about multi-window or?
I agree with everything that Gokan said on this one. Being able to, people are consistently multitasking during meetings and being able to try to accomplish more than one thing. Being able to have that ability to step away from conversations and find information and be able to still be productive back in the conversation and meeting is going to be something that's really important. I think it'll be really valuable once it finishes rolling out.
Awesome. Let's move on to the next one, Gokan.
Yes, for sure. Next one is being able to pin channels.
And I think this one is live, right? This one has shipped.
Yes.
It has been shipped a few weeks ago. And that's also something which I was really looking forward because, Vlad, we work for the same company and we have a bunch of teams. And at a certain moment, finding information is becoming complicated. And if you're like in a huge organization, you will have a lot of mentions, a lot of new stuff into Teams. So being able to pin channels into the top of your team is, again, a deal breaker because you can take your favorite channels, bring them to the top, and focus on your work and get your work done.
Awesome, man. And like you said, I think with Teams especially now is if you're a part of a bunch of different teams with all of them have 40 different channels, you kind of see the fire hose of information. They all turn black and it makes you kind of want to go look into them. And it's easier if they're just minimized and all of your favorite channels are at the top, so you can focus on those and look in all of the other ones only when needed. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely, I love that feature as well.
Do you use it a lot? Do you use it?
Yeah, a lot, especially for the invoices one.
Awesome. I think let's move over to the next one. Let's see what Gokan has for us next.
The new integration between Outlook and Teams. So I know there is a lot of discussions going with that new feature, but I'm really looking forward from an end user perspective where we are not actually sending thousands of emails to actually collaborate on one subject. The main advantage of having that new functionality is to bring the information from Outlook into Teams and get the attachment of that specific conversation, of that specific email, and then begin real collaboration with the Teams experience and the Teams extension model into Microsoft Teams. Because take the example that today, if you have like an email, which is very important, you can bring them into Teams, get the documents, exchange with those documents, use Power Automate, Power Apps, any of those Power Platform tools, and bring the real innovation of that Power Platform as well into Teams on that specific document. So I'm really looking forward for this from an end user perspective. I don't know what you guys think about that. but I think I really love that feature.
I think the more that we can help integrate users to being able to use a single experience and use all their content without having to go between different applications is going to both increase their capabilities within their organizations, as well as help relieve some of the stress of having to worry about going constantly back to Outlook or in Teams to try to get their content and collaborate with people. It'll allow people to collaborate in the environment and the tool that they love using a little bit easier. So I'm excited for this integration.
Do you guys think this will cause a bit of a, not problem, but a bit of a confusion for users? Like say I receive an email from somebody internal, I put it on Teams, then we say, okay, let's continue the conversation there, but somebody replies in the Outlook email and that channel, so those conversations, we now have two different streams of conversations that are not united. Do you think that will cause some troubles for end users?
I think just like any new functionality rolls out, I think there's certainly going to be a little bit of change management as well as governance that's going to have to be a part of this. And part of it is determining, when those conversations need to go into Teams and helping either create org policies or training around it to kind of help educate users in the best decisions and when to carry it on. But yeah, it's definitely a concern, sure.
And we have a question in the chat from Lady Lighty Light. So sharing attachments in Teams from Outlook, won't that save the attachment in Exchange and SharePoint in the backend? Because it sounds like duplicates.
Well, they are today. So if you still have your email into Exchange and you forward this to Teams, well, yes, you will have duplicates. That's for sure. Because it will upload the two documents, like as you can show an example, the website copy v3 and the design guidelines into SharePoint.
Okay, so it'll be really important to not have two versions of the truth, to really tell people we work on this in Teams from now on, because if you have another version in Outlook that people update, you then need to put it back into SharePoint. Kind of like in the old days, it seems we're going back to the same problems that we had before between email and SharePoint, but now we have Teams as a front end instead of SharePoint, and SharePoint is just in the back. No, is it only me? Or?
And definitely that's great feedback, actually. We could even raise this in the user voice and check if Microsoft is maybe doing something in the backend, because that feature is still not released, if I'm not wrong. Maybe they will have something that will remove the files from Exchange and only host them in SharePoint. But what I'm aware of is there is nothing planned for that kind of operation.
Okay, let me see if there's any other questions. No, so I hope that answers that question. Okay, do you have any other features you're excited about?
Yes, we still have two other features. And the next one is then the tasks in Microsoft Teams. Like I'm not traveling as much as you do, Vlad, but I do like 30 or 40 events per year. And one of the jokes I'm always doing, like, do we know how many task engines we have in Office 365? And it's like 6, 7, it depends, like To-Do, Wunderlist, SharePoint task, Outlook task, etc., etc. And with Microsoft Teams, I can't remember all of them, but we have like planner tasks as well. Like a bunch of them. And in Microsoft Teams today, well, hopefully in the coming weeks, we will have a unified view of your personal and assigned tasks within Microsoft Teams. Tasks from To-Do, Teams channels, planners, Outlook, they will all be appearing into one single experience. And that's something which I really have been waiting for so much time, because if you work for multiple organizations, if you have multiple customers, friends, personal jobs, running community events, etc., you are using a bunch of them. You have a bunch of tasks, and having them all into one screen, it will, well, for me at least, I will gain a lot of time. Instead of scrolling down from different screens, different applications, I can manage everything from one single screen. That's actually amazing for me.
Okay, so let me ask you something. One of the things, well, three of the things actually, man, there's so many task engines. 3 of the things that I don't see in this view. So I think we also have SharePoint tasks, OneNote tasks, and Project Online tasks, which are, again, other 3 different task engines where I could have tasks assigned to myself. Have you heard anything about those? Or like what's no?
No, I didn't hear personally anything about that. And
I mean, I know we're not supposed to do that many SharePoint tasks anymore. We're kind of supposed to go with the group concept and have everything in Planner, right? I think that's where we're moving. And same thing with OneNote task. We're supposed to kind of have an attached planner to there and kind of put everything in there. And I guess that will be the recommendation going forward, so people have a unified view.
Absolutely agree with that.
Okay, quick question. Since it's kind of connected to task, question from the chat over here. What about calendars? This is a big request, creating the background SharePoint calendar versus the group calendar versus exchanged shared calendars. Talk about tasks, but let's also talk about calendars here.
Oh my gosh, that's. I let the RC respond to that. It's. The calendar question. I remember I had a talk with Chris McNulty about calendars and the modern calendar in SharePoint, etc., etc. I already have headaches. Like I just had a few seconds of delay and I have headaches. So I just let the RC respond to that question. It's.
Oh, don't worry. I'll have Advil ready for you afterwards. So, I mean, the biggest thing with calendars is right now is that because Teams is tied to the Office 365 group on the back end, is that in theory, you're supposed to be using that calendar because that calendar can also work with the group calendar web part inside of SharePoint to help bring those two together right now. I know having a regular Outlook calendar experience or a unified calendar experience is something that Microsoft has received a lot of feedback about, and I know that the teams have taken that to heart, and discussions have happened. So who knows, maybe we'll be able to see kind of a unified experience come out. But I know right now it does get confusing for users to determine, even the difference between the different calendar views and the way the web parts approach showing calendars is not in a way that most users are familiar with it. So it's going to be a little bit interesting. For me, I know one of the hardest things about the calendar is the fact that each group has its own calendar, and trying to just overlay, those to see what's going on can be quite a challenge right now for me anyway.
The word overlay just makes me think at SharePoint calendar overlays and kind of had some of those flashbacks with like the 8 colors that we could choose from, and magenta is the closest one to red. And I see a comment here in the chat. Not the event cards; they are universally hated.
I'm not going to respond to that, but yeah, calendars has been always a pain in Office 365.
A question.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, question from Lisa here. Can we see the group calendar in Teams?
Well, you already have. Well, it's from Outlook is where it lives. Right now, the group calendar itself doesn't appear in Teams.
Actually, I found it on User Voice. Looks like it's something they're working on.
Yes, they're working on, but you can't see today the Office 365 group calendar into Teams. It's only your personal calendar. It would be great if they had like a connector, like you hit on the plus button to have a new tab and have a connector to the Office 365 calendar view. But I don't know if they're working on it or it's just a user voice.
Can you see that? The user voice says working on it, yeah.
They're working on it, so yeah.
It's 13,000 votes.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever get a little bit worried about the fact that everything is add a new tab? I'm so worried about having 30 tabs at the top of a team for functionality. It's scary.
Yeah, some of the, especially when you start having like 8 Excel spreadsheets at the top, 4 different OneNotes, you have the wiki, and then you have other connectors kind of put stuff in there. It becomes a lot to look at the top. And sometimes I kind of miss the old, I know which document library it is in SharePoint and I'll go there rather than search for it. Which tab is it at the top? But yeah, I think a way to get the group calendar in Teams today can we put it on a SharePoint page, right? I think there's a web part for that.
Yes.
And add that web part as a tab.
Yeah,
Oh my God! No, Vlad, don't do that. No,
hey,
please.
but it would work, no?
It would technically work, but please, no.
I feel like he's going to have Elio trying that out at Valo now to test it.
Group calendar as a service.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Cool. Next one, if you agree, Vlad.
Yes, let's move on before we derail too much.
Yeah, the next one is being able to publish Power Apps into the Teams app catalog. You can now download any of those newly created apps from Power Apps, select it and hit on the export button. It will download this as a zip file. That's actually something that I also provide as a feedback. Instead of downloading this into the download folder into your machine, I would love to see this getting into my OneDrive, right? Where I could actually have a single location where I could export every single app, but that's another story. So you can actually download your app and then bring that app with the App Studio and bring that new application in the Teams catalog where everybody can just use and pin that application into Microsoft Teams. So actually, every app maker or citizen developer can build his application, can actually build some automation. You can download it, bring it to the app catalog, use it, and pin it into your Microsoft team. How amazing is this?
It's pretty cool. Some questions I have. How many, do you see a lot of Power Apps inside of Teams so far? And I think this is live right now, correctly? Or no?
Yes, it is. It is live. It is live. It is live.
Have you seen people use it? Because I still, and again, this is not a Power App show, so I won't get too deep into it, but Power Apps can get really complicated. And then you're really talking about, okay, somebody building a Power App, then exporting it, then adding it in the Teams App Studio. Kind of, what is the target audience for this feature?
Okay, so actually, I have two responses therefore. The first thing, how I look to that is, why did Microsoft build that kind of feature and actually release that? Because I don't think we have like a huge user voice with that kind of demand. So the response therefore is, I think that they really wanted to show to the world that the collaboration stack and the Power Platform stack actually are aligned and they can work perfectly with each other. That's the first thing. Secondly, do I see a lot of organizations using that? No. Because first of all, licensing is still a big question mark at many levels, and many organizations still struggle to understand how the licensing of Power Apps, Power Automate, etc. is working. And secondly, as you mentioned, Vlad, Power Apps is amazing, and I have like a lot of courses about Power Apps. If you use SharePoint as a data source, it is easy. But as you mentioned, you can get very, very far away, and maintaining that kind of solution can be actually painful for every organization. So everybody is like, I'm going to use it, I'm going to make some POCs, and I'm going to just check out for simple stuff. But really, enterprise applications today, I still didn't see in my customers. They are definitely using it for small operations, such as having an application on the reception and calling the attendee, or having like a vacation request application, a car rental application that I have built for an application. But those applications are not enterprise. Like if the application is down, your business is not down, right? So they're like simple applications that you could build and use. And to respond to the last question, to who is this application or way to do meant for? Actually, that's for, we have like developers and citizen devs. Today we have like the app makers. You have like something in between of the developer and citizen dev, the app makers. And those app makers will actually build the app and bring it into Teams and evangelize their solution for the Teams users.
That's a great thing, and I think you're the first. I've seen the word before, but you're the first person to actually put it on the scale. So you see the app maker as something between the citizen developer and the developer,
Yes.
not something between the power user and citizen developer.
Actually, the thing is, a citizen dev was always qualified as an end user who can do something with the Power Platform. But for me, an app maker is something who understands the added value, who understands what code is, who understands the logic behind of every single artifact, but is still not a developer. So I think personally, we have the modern developer, which is using the modern stack to develop some stuff. Then we have the app makers, and then finally the citizen developers. And I think personally that this kind of solution is meant for the app makers. Because as you mentioned, if we give this to the citizen developers, they'll get lost because they have to download, they have to upload, and the App Studio, they have to upload this to the App Studio, bring some values, they need the special rights. It's going to be too much for them.
Okay, that actually makes sense. It's the first time I hear this kind of separation, but that makes a lot of sense. Darcy, what do you think?
I think Gokan's really right on this one. Power Apps is not one of my fortes. It's something that I personally struggle with creating past a minimum, very small kind of form. So I think anything that's going to require any potential logic or really fit that enterprise use case is probably going to be something that at least someone past a regular citizen developer or even to full-on developer is going to be able to have to create, which also brings in manageability issues, technical debt, and things like that within an organization, being able to have someone to maintain and keep those kind of applications up to date as they move forward. So we'll see what happens.
And let me just expand on that topic there. Do you see the same for Power Automate? I was going to say Microsoft Flow, but for Power Automate, where do you see the people that create flows? At what level are they?
So I think it's been really interesting with Power Platform because I was talking with my client earlier today on this, and it's kind of like, Power BI is kind of like the old grandfather who, he's seen it all, he's been there, he knows exactly what he's doing, he's secure. And I think Flow is really starting to come into his own as kind of like the new teenager growing up. Like he's kind of beat some of those early rough roads and is really, the functionality is really starting to shine through, and he's doing really well. And Power Apps, I feel, is still kind of the 2-year-old throwing a couple fits every once in a while. But I think Power Automate really has kind of stepped up with not only helping bridge the gap of what those SharePoint Designer workflows used to do, but helping bridge the gap between different applications outside of the Microsoft ecosystem. Is really a value that we've been missing for a long time, and I think it's doing a really good job of growing to fit that need.
That's awesome, and I love your example. And it's true, you kind of never hear people complaining about Power BI. It almost feels like since it got released, it did what it was supposed to do. They had everything set up, no false expectations, no nothing. Everybody was like, okay, this makes sense. Let's go with it. Like, go in production right away. Power Automate and Power Apps took a lot longer to get to enterprise ready. And I know some people might argue they're still not there yet.
Okay, that was my question. Do you think they are enterprise ready today?
This is recorded, right?
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not asking the question. My apologies.
I don't think Power Apps is. I mean, I think there's a lot of potential behind it, but I feel like it felt like it came to market rushed to provide an answer to the info path and SharePoint Designer workflow issues. With those applications going away, there wasn't really a strong contender to take over those workloads for an enterprise application. So I feel like Microsoft had an idea of really what they wanted, but I feel like they came too fast to market on some of these things that weren't mature enough at the start to really answer those workflows, and as a result has caused a little bit of confusion and panic in some organizations when InfoPath and SharePoint Designer workflows were kind of put on the chopping block, and they really didn't have anything strong to come up and replace them. So I'm hoping that it continues to grow and get better. We've seen a lot of new functionality come out, but I'd like to see some of the functionality also solidify and get better before new features are added.
Okay. So I will just add a final touch, the Gokan's touch on this topic, and please don't get me wrong, but I will call Power Apps and Automate enterprise ready when we will get offline capability, because DRC mentioned it, and that's amazing. Like SharePoint Designer, we could use it without even you had your Office application installed and you could use it. I'm still missing, even with Microsoft Teams, the offline capability. Like in Outlook, you can still work offline. For me, any application that we have today should be, or at least they should work on an offline capability model, because many organizations are actually relying on that. And they have a lot of in-house built applications. And they can't just simply say, oh, my internet is down, my business is down. And I think personally, we should find a way for Automate, for Flow, for Teams to have actually an offline model which still allows us to do some work. Then we could actually, I think, say we're really done enterprise ready.
That's a great point.
I think offline, yeah. And I see myself as a bit of an edge scenario where I do a lot of my email answering in planes, like especially on the smaller ones or until Wi-Fi actually works. Open it up, offline mode, write out 30 replies to stuff I should have answered last week, and then kind of when I open it up in the lounge or at the hotel, it's like pow, sent, all of them sent, and I know that I'm done. But
could you imagine having that scenario with Teams, being able to read, to respond, to even continue on your Power App without having an internet connection? That's a real deal breaker, and I think a lot of CTOs, a lot of organizations would love that.
So you see, I see it as a must-have for Power Apps. So definitely for Power Apps, I think it's a must-have, because we see it a lot for field workers, right? When they have to go certain places, they use the Power App to log data. Yes, that's in SharePoint, but you should be able, you don't know if you're going to have Wi-Fi, if you're in a forest, wherever you are, you need that offline mode for Power Apps. For Teams, I'm not sure, because it's such rapid type of conversation, and you're in a team, other people might answer before you. I know you might tell me that the exact same thing can happen by email, right? But
yeah, that's the same. And definitely, if you look only from conversation, then you're right. But Teams is so amazing in multiple things that, as I mentioned, you can run your app through the Teams App Store. So why can't I just launch my Teams and run my Power App through Teams, which is also offline? Or why can't I just read my documents from Teams? Because OneDrive can do that, right? With Windows 10, you can just right-click on a document and say always available, and I can read my documents. Yeah. Why do I have the same capability in Teams? That's my point. And that's only like the Gokan Ozcifci, the offline, but I could also argue on Power Apps, why don't I have a multi-user scenario in Power Apps? Because today, if you build an application, it's only a one user case application. There is no co-authoring into that app, right? And don't get me wrong, in every organization, when they build an app, you have a bunch of developers working on the same app. Today, it's not possible.
And I think that's where a bit we kind of split the use case between Logic Apps and Power Apps, where I think if you need those co-authoring, or and I don't have the word for it. It's on the tip of my tongue, but like being able to actually manage the source code and collaborate, I think Logic Apps is the way. Power Apps is really not there yet.
But then you come into the, Logic App, that's for a real developer, but what do we do then from the app maker and the citizen developer? Because I can't expect from a citizen developer to go and build some stuff with Logic Apps. But that's, again, not the whole story of Microsoft Teams. Let's go back into Microsoft Teams. Okay,
let's go back in Microsoft Teams. Wow. And that's the fun thing about those. We always go left and right.
And that was the last slide, actually. I have no other excitement things to show that has been announced at Ignite 2019.
I know I have a wish list for things that come out. And the first one for the wish list for this year is hopefully a better functionality between switching between multi-tenant use of Teams. Yeah. It's top of mind for me.
So I was just laughing because I'm in the Microsoft tenant as a guest under 3 different emails. So sometimes depending on what team I need to go, I need to log out Teams, log in another team, and then tenant switch.
It really is horrible.
It is. And I think that's the biggest, like out of my wish list, probably that would be at the top of my list. Definitely.
Okay, then I have the number 2 of that wish list. Is we're all part of different teams, tenants, right? And from your calendar, you can join any meeting. It doesn't matter in which tenant you are. But then some functionalities aren't working. Like if you assist a Microsoft webinar or PGI, if you are not in the Microsoft tenant, you can't see the commands or you can't even comment during the meeting. So you have to log out from your tenant, go to the Microsoft tenant, log in to be able to see the commands and being able to respond to commands.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Okay. What else is on your wish list? We got time for 2 more things, then we need to start wrapping it up. DRC?
For me, I'm hoping for some of the performance to continue to get better. Teams, I love Teams. I use it a lot, but I know like when I start running a lot of videos and calls and things like that, it eats up every little bit of resources on my laptop. And and some of the Mac users I've discussed with have a lot of issues with performance as well. So I'm hoping as they continue to add functionality, they continue to streamline and help that resource hog become a little bit better as well.
Awesome. Yeah, it eats RAM for breakfast. That's why my new laptop is a 64 gigs of RAM. I can run Teams and Chrome at the same time.
And that's it.
But I can run both of them at the same time.
Oh my God.
Okay, we got 1 minute to the top of the hour. So as well, actually, last question. I think you both have sessions on Microsoft Teams at the SharePoint conference, right?
Yes, that's correct. So I'd like to invite everybody who is interested into tips and tricks on how to use Microsoft Teams. Last year at the SharePoint conference, I've done a similar session, but now with all those new experiences, all of those new announcements, we'll have a fun but really interactive session about tips and tricks on how to use Microsoft Teams with all of those connectors, SharePoint in the backend, DLP, monitoring, the files experience, etc., etc. So just join my session.
Awesome. How about you, Darcy? I think, did Darcy freeze? Looks like it, right, Gokan? It's not only
it looks like.
Okay, let me go and I'll actually talk really quick about her session. Not as good as her, of course, but let me do my best. Let me search here. So Darcy's session is collaboration from the trenches, planning out your internal community with Microsoft Teams.
Okay, so she's not here, so everybody join my session.
Don't even think about it.
Oh my God, please, dear. Oh my God.
Back in time just to hear that.
Oh my God.
Hotel Wi-Fi. What can I say, gentlemen?
But, oh my God.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, my session at SPC is really about helping you guys architect and determining what those internal communities look like, the best functionality to use to help build them, and different ways to think about permissions and what your end goal is.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much to both of you for taking the time out of your evening since you're both in Europe and chatting with us about Microsoft Teams. Before we talk about next week's guest, first of all, everybody, if you enjoyed the show, make sure you click on the heart icon on the top right of your screen to follow the channel. And let's take a look at a video talking about SharePoint Conference 2020.
What makes the SharePoint conference special is the SharePoint community, which is the best community in tech.
People come from all over the world to learn about our latest innovations, about best practices, and also just to network and have fun.
The SharePoint conference has something for everyone. You have access to over 20 workshops, 200 plus sessions, 225 speakers from Microsoft and counting.
It's about the technology, it's about the people first and foremost.
It's the exchange of ideas.
People stay for the community engagement, people stay for our one-on-one meetings, our research sessions, our workshops, and more.
I get excited about the fact that the SharePoint conference is more than just about SharePoint. It's about success. It's about collaboration.
It's a community event, an amalgamation of expert speakers, expert staff. It's just an exciting event to be at every year.
We are very open. It's a two-way dialogue here. It is great to run into people in the hallways and they grab you and say, want to tell the story. It's so great to listen and hear why they're here and what they're working on. I love these events.
It's an amazing experience.
It's just a great event to be at for community.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Now let's talk about the next show. Usually I'm always saying next week's show, but we're actually not going to have a show next week as I will be on the plane to Europe for Microsoft Ignite the Tour Zurich. So our next show will be on March 4th, same time, 10:11 a.m. Pacific or 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. And the two awesome guests that I'll have on the show are Christina Torok and John Moore, and we're going to talk about Microsoft Stream. Let's hope they're not going to give us too much of a hard time for doing this on Twitch. So don't give them any ideas in the chat. But I really hope to see all of you again March 4th, same time, to talk about Microsoft Stream. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of the week.